With what is starting to feel like the Jeff Sessions show, even though it's supposed to be the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Sonia Sotomayor. In the absence of any real drama, suspense about whether or not Judge Sotomayor will actually be confirmed to the Supreme Court, it sort of seems like an unavoidable conclusion that she will. The hearings are instead turning into a showcase for the Senate rather than a showcase for her. The Republican opposition to Judge Sotomayor is still steering largely clear of her judicial record, except for one case Republicans have characterized as a pro-affirmative action ruling, and they're criticizing that one a lot. Beyond that, the opening statements and questions from the committee's 7 Republicans, and particularly from their leader, Jeff Sessions, have been much more revealing of the political beliefs of Republican senators than they have been of the judicial beliefs or temperament of this nominee, who you will be surprised to hear is not a person named Miguel Estrada.
We would have picked Miguel Estrada.
Miguel Estrada would be a U.S. Circuit judge today.
I said I had a letter earlier from Miguel Estrada.
He is a brilliant, universally respected lawyer.
He was a Honduran immigrant.
I'm puzzled why Mr. Estrada keeps coming up.
We'd all have voted for him.
The Miguel Estrada case.
I don't think anybody on that side would have voted for Judge Estrada.
Mr. Estrada is not the nominee here.
No, Mr. Estrada is not the nominee. Miguel Estrada was rejected by the Senate after George W. Bush nominated him for a federal judgeship, like lots of other people were rejected by the Senate after being nominated by George W. Bush. Dozens of people, in fact. So why is he the one they keep bringing up? Among all the many failed George W. Bush nominees, what is it about Miguel Estrada in particular that warrants so much comparison from the Republicans of him and Sonia Sotomayor? A mystery. Maybe this next revealing moment from the hearings today will provide us a clue.
The circuit voted, and you voted not to reconsider the prior case. You voted to stay with the decision of the circuit, and in fact, your vote was the key vote. Had you voted with Judge Cabranes, himself of Puerto Rican ancestry, had you voted with him, you could have changed that case.
I'm sorry, what's relevant about Judge Cabranes in this decision?
Judge Cabranes, himself of Puerto Rican ancestry.
Do you see the important point that Jeff Sessions has just drilled down to here? It's very subtle.
Judge Cabranes, himself of Puerto Rican ancestry.
Okay, you see? Judge Cabranes is totally Puerto Rican. So is Judge Sotomayor. And yet, she did not vote the same way as Judge Cabranes, the other Puerto Rican. You see what I'm getting at here? Yeah. When Jeff Sessions was himself trying to become a federal judge back in 1986, he at the time, in those confirmation hearings, admitted to calling a white lawyer a, quote, disgrace to his race, because that lawyer represented black clients. Now that same Jeff Sessions is the Republican Party's standard bearer on who's qualified to be a judge or not. And he's making very clear what he sees when he looks at a nominee like Judge Sonia Sotomayor. What about her most predicts how she would vote as a judge in his mind. Who he sees as her peers, the appropriate people to compare her to.
The Miguel Estrada case, I said I had a letter earlier from Miguel Estrada. He was nominated by President Bush. Had you voted with Judge Cabranes, himself of Puerto Rican ancestry, had you voted with him, you could have changed that case.
There was a moment today that was not just about race, though. Senator Sessions did go out on a limb today and suggest that Judge Sotomayor could also be compared, unfavorably of course, to another female judge. And in so doing, we got today's inadvertently revealing Republican moment number 3.
I believe in Judge Cedarbaum's formulation. And she said, and you disagreed, and this was really the context of your speech. And you used her statement as sort of a beginning of your discussion. And you said she believes that a judge, no matter what their gender or background, should strive to reach the same conclusion, and she believes that's possible. You then argue that you don't think it's possible in all, maybe even most cases.
One rule of thumb when you're choosing someone to be your ally against somebody else: make sure your chosen ally agrees with you and isn't, say, sitting in the hearing room in support of the person you're trying to use them to attack.
My friend Judge Cedarbaum is here this afternoon, and we are good friends, and I believe that we both approach judging in the same way, which is looking at the facts of each individual case and applying the law to those facts.
In fact, Judge Sotomayor's one-time mentor and longtime friend, Judge Miriam Cedarbaum, was in the hearing room. She then tag-teamed that attempted Jeff Sessions smackdown by telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, "I don't believe for a minute that there are any differences in our approach to judging, and her personal predilections have no effect on her approach to judging. We'd both like to see more women on the courts." Which I guess means that Senator Jeff Sessions should stop quoting that particular judge as a means of attacking Judge Sotomayor. The Sotomayor hearings are expected to go on for at least 2 more days, which may or may not mean 2 more days of Republican Party public implosion on the issue of race. Joining us now is Dahlia Lithwick, chief legal correspondent and senior editor for Slate.com. She's been covering the nomination hearings from Washington. Dahlia, thanks for coming back on the show tonight.
Hey, Rachel. Thank you for having me.
You got to watch all of these rounds of questions in person today. Yesterday, you said after opening statements that it seemed like the opposition strategy against Sotomayor was really, in a basic sense, about issues of race. Was it day 2 of that today?
A lot of it really was. I was surprised, actually, how many times we heard the wise Latina woman thing come up. I thought, maybe we'll go to that well once, maximum twice, but we went there many, many times today, and many, many times what we were told is, sure, you have this impressive 17-year record as a judge, and we can't find much to complain about, but here's what we know. We know that your speech, your wise Latina speech, somehow gives us a truer sense of who you really are than that entire record. So it was always sort of trying to bifurcate who she is holding herself out to be and who she really is because of this one sentence. So it's interesting. It's sort of a way of framing it as this is the real issue and everything else is just kind of wallpaper.
I was happy today, though, because there were a few questions about Sotomayor's judicial record other than the Ricci case, a few questions that weren't about speeches. Senator Grassley asked her about eminent domain. Senator Kyle asked her about a Second Amendment case. What were those lines of questioning like? Did those raise substantive issues without a good back and forth?
They were both very funny colloquies, Rachel, because in both cases you have her record, which is pretty modest. In both the gun case that they talked about and the takings case they talked about, she didn't get to the big issue. She looked at a much narrower issue. And so in both these cases you have, Grassley saying to her, well, why didn't you get to the big issue from the Kelo, the famous Connecticut eminent domain case? Why didn't you get to that? And she would say, well, the guy just didn't file his appeal on time. It was a question of statute of limitations. I didn't have to get to the big constitutional question. Same thing in the guns case, is you have this angry Republican saying to her, Orrin Hatch is saying, why didn't you get to this big, huge issue in Heller? Why didn't you get to whether the Second Amendment is incorporated against the states? And she says, well, because the Supreme Court told me not to. In Heller, the Supreme Court expressly said, we're not getting to this issue, so I'm not going to get to this issue. So you have this weird inversion where they're like, why aren't you more activist, Judge Sotomayor? And it was sort of surreal. When they do get to her cases, it's to say, you shouldn't be so humble and modest. That's so John Roberts.